Hi there. We're going to talk more about animal welfare over the next 3 papers, but these ones focus on chickens. When we think about chickens, many of us will think about birds being stuck in cages. And when we think about that, it angers us. We think about how they've had their bills shaved, they've maybe had their feathers clipped, their toes maybe too, and how it's an unnatural system. We would much prefer them to be outdoors, living free range. But how often do we actually think about the reality of the life for the bird? And how often are we imposing our human emotions on that bird when we think about our decisions and our beliefs about that? Probably more often than we should, but there are important aspects again around animal welfare to do with both caged and free-range production, be it for broilers or be it for layers. And the papers I've picked touch upon those aspects and hopefully will help educate you in some way in terms of what's actually happening today. The first one I pulled up was about chicken welfare being influenced more by actually the number, the density of the animals, than by the situation or the free-range environment in which they were living. And this is a paper from Nature. Now, Nature papers tend to have a kind of coffee table appeal. They're written with people like everybody in mind. So the science is sometimes a bit glib, but this one to me goes into some great statistical methods. It really pulls apart the data. And I found that part of this paper really quite complex, but the way it's written, it's short, it's punchy, it gets the point across quite quickly. And that point is largely around the fact that, you know what, chickens die. Sad but true. And even in these free-range environments, these chickens die. In this case, actually, sorry, this is more about broilers. So these birds are meat birds, and they're looking at how the density of the animals really is affecting the way in which they're dying and the welfare within the areas that those broilers are being raised. And what they find is it's actually the way in which the companies that own the production facilities, and that might sound terrible in relation to animal production, but the companies that own the facilities and the way they manage those facilities, particularly with regard to the build-up of wet litter on the ground or the management of gases from their excrement, the ammonia and the other such volatiles that are produced from the breakdown of that manure, are really what come down to affecting the animal's welfare in these situations. So never mind how dense they are, but actually how we manage the environment in which we find them becomes more important. And that environmental management of chickens is a flavour that I think flows through to these other papers. So that was the Nature paper. There was then an interesting review of free-range production conducted by a couple of gentlemen from the Roseworth campus down in South Australia. So this is one of the agricultural campuses that exist here in Australia. It again has a very brief abstract that really does highlight the fact, it's about examining the system. It's about looking at animal husbandry, about looking at their welfare from a point of view of how we produce those chickens. I found that when I read that abstract, it really doesn't actually tell me what I'm going to learn from the review. It's a very closed abstract in that regard, and I have to come really to the very last paragraph in the paper to actually get to the point where it says, that there are still risks even from these open free-range systems. The birds have to actually deal with other birds, which they maybe didn't have to in cage systems. It talks about the fact there are maybe risks to their health that are more or increased in an open system than we would actually find in a cage system where diseased birds could be removed more readily. It also talks about the fact that there are maybe issues with how we are maybe affected by issues with animal and bird hygiene. So there are still some issues to iron out there, but it does also point out the fact that there may well be a move due to pressure put on bird producers by people like us with regard to animal welfare through instruments such as how we buy and what we buy, and labeling becomes important. So a nice review in that it's written in a very open format. The methodology is very clear. It's looking at what policy, what procedures, what actually exists in the world today. And it takes us to a point where we can go, you know what? I feel okay about this free-range production, but actually become more aware of some of the problems that are maybe faced by the system. The final paper is a really interesting one from a proper journal again. It's by a group of authors who've pulled the system apart in both Australia, UK and the USA, and again it focuses on bird welfare. The abstract takes us through some of the bigger changes that have occurred and talks about some of the discrepancies between how birds are produced in various countries, and comes to the conclusion that at the moment there's a difference really about how cage systems are used in a number of different countries, and how some countries have really embraced cage modification to improve animal welfare, but others still have a way to go. Australia is sitting in some good areas in some parts of it and some less good areas in others. So again, maybe it will alter your beliefs, one around how responsible we are as people that produce livestock to the animal welfare, but also how responsible we are as a country in terms of how we want to see our birds managed, and what kind of things that maybe we as a populace might be demanding of our science to show improvement and better delivery in our agriculture to make better production systems with happier, healthier chickens, if I can put those human emotive states on them, into the future. So that was how we looked at animal welfare in chickens, and I hope you found those papers interesting. Thank you.